Today we're going to show you how to change the damper assembly on your refrigerator. That's a really easy job. All we're going to need is a 1/4-inch nut driver, a small flat blade screwdriver, probably going to need a pair of needle nose pliers, and a putty knife. Let me show you how we do it. Now to begin this repair, we're going to start by opening the refrigerator door. We're going to turn the refrigerator off using the controls, or you can also pull the refrigerator out and disconnect it from the power supply. And next we're going to remove all of the items from the top shelf to give ourselves some access to the control housing. The damper assembly is located at the very back. You'll need to remove this whole unit together to access that. We'll take it out, we'll set it on a suitable work surface, and then we can change the damper. So using a 1/4-inch nut driver, go right to the very back. There's one screw that secures it at the very back. So loosen that one completely. Then there is another one farther up along the side here. And you'll need to remove the light bulb probably to get better access to that one. And again, we'll loosen that screw completely. And next there are 3 across the bottom of the control panel at the front, and we'll need to remove those as well. Now support that control panel while we remove the final screw. And we'll just lower that down enough that you can disengage it at the back. And it'll have to pull out to the right. And there's a capillary tube that goes into a guide tube into the freezer section, so we have to be very careful not to damage that. Once we've got it out that far, we can lower it down, and you'll see a wire harness connector at the top that we will need to unplug. So depress the locking tabs on the side to release them. And disconnect the harness. And then we can pull that control completely out of the freezer compartment. And now we can set the whole assembly on a suitable work surface, and we can change out the damper. Now to remove this damper assembly, we'll have to also remove a couple of wires that are attached to the little limit switch on the side of it, as well as a harness connector to the damper motor, and a ground wire that is attached to the motor as well. So we'll pull those off with our needle nose pliers. Now the wire harness connector to the damper motor has a little locking tab attached to it, so using a small flat blade screwdriver, we're just going to reach in there and lift up on that locking tab, and then we can pull that connector off. Now there may be a bit of tape on the side of that damper assembly. So we'll see if we can just peel that off enough that we can reuse it. Now it's a fairly tight fit in that housing, so if we press carefully on it from the front side, we can push that right through. And if need be, take your putty knife and just go in along the edge of that housing and make sure that you can free it up. Take care not to damage the housing. Or the capillary tube that is attached to the bottom of that assembly, as there is a self-adhesive face on it that wants to hold it in there. So just use gentle pressure. Once you get it out far enough, take the putty knife, see if we can separate that adhesive. Once you have it out far enough that you can access that capillary tube, you may want to pull that out of the little housing. There's a little channel that wraps that around the opening. Just carefully separate that. And then you can completely remove the rest of the assembly. Now you may find that the styrofoam base of that does not want to separate easily, and that adhesive may be holding it somewhat permanently in there. So if need be, just break the rest of that styrofoam away, and then you can clean that up afterwards. Once we get it far enough, we can also remove the capillary tube for the freezer control, and then remove the rest of the styrofoam housing. Again, we'll pull that capillary tube for the fresh food control out of the way so that we don't damage it. Try not to bend it any more than you have to. And then with your putty knife, we'll scrape the remainder of that adhesive away from the housing. Now we've removed as much of that old adhesive as we could out of there. And it's very sticky, so it's a difficult job to get that out of there. We're now ready to reinstall the new unit. And we're going to have to wrap that capillary tube around the little channel on the bottom of that. Now it has a protective film over top of that adhesive that needs to be removed to give us access to do that. Then we're going to align that capillary tube, snap it into those little retainers, and you can carefully use the flat side of that small flat screwdriver just to pop that in. We need to have that completely into that channel so that the damper assembly will lay flat in the housing. And next we'll rotate that up into position. We're also going to need to relocate the capillary tube for the freezer control, and that will come through that little notch in the channel of that styrofoam. And you can either try reusing some of the cellophane tape on the fold control, or just get yourself a new piece of plastic tape just to hold that into position until we have it mounted in the housing. And we're going to carefully line that up with the opening in the bottom. And remember, that adhesive is very sticky, so we need to make sure that we have it right the first time. Press that into the opening. And then we can take a piece of masking tape, wide masking tape, and wrap that around the side of the styrofoam block to attach it to the plastic housing as well. Now when reinstalling this control assembly, again make sure that our wire harnesses are tucked in out of the way, because we have screws that are going to come up through these 3 points on the front and these 2 along the side. So we'll put it into position, and we're going to take that capillary tube and you're going to locate a little notch on that rectangular opening. There's a notch at the bottom, and there's a guide tube located right above that. So if we insert that capillary tube into that opening, we should be able to feed that rather easily into that guide tube. Push it in until it's just about completely flush. Then we'll take our wire harness connector, we'll locate that into the harness at the top and press it in until both locking tabs engage. And then we can lift the back of that housing into position. We'll make sure that the long portion that rear screw goes into fits into an opening at the back. And once we've got that positioned, we can just hold up the front. We'll take one screw and put it in the center at the front of the control. Just lower it down enough to make sure that we're into the opening. Start that one. Do the same for the two other front ones. You can just tilt that down enough to see where the screw goes first. You can just look in through that gap across the top just to make sure that we have the screw in the hole in the liner. You can tighten all three of these. Then we'll take that long screw, we're going to insert it into the opening at the back, push it in as far as it will go, and take our nut driver, tuck that in behind the water filter. You need to make sure that that screw goes through the opening at the back of that slot. And then we'll tighten that one. As you tighten it, you can hold up on that housing just to keep it as close to the top as possible. And make sure that it tightens up securely. And then the one remaining one at the side, closer to the front. Now we're ready to reload the upper shelf. We'll turn both controls back on to their normal settings. We'll reinstall the light bulb in the socket. And our repair is complete.